Okay, so I'm here to talk about the art of being responsive. But before I do that and explain exactly what it means, I want to talk about why this has become so important over the last few years. Now, my background at Made by Many is helping companies innovate and take new products to market. And that covers everything from strategy, design, and build. But as you just heard from Kirsten, in my heart, I'm a designer and always have been. However, since I graduated in 1999, the way that I work and my role has changed a lot. In fact, at the beginning of my career, everything was big design up front, about as big as you can possibly get. Everything was completed up front and then handed over to the development team. But that was okay, because all of the information architecture and the strategy was completed up front too. In fact, here I am, standing in the middle of a waterfall, looking rather smug because I was only 21 and didn't know any better. But as we all know now, this way of working is incredibly wasteful and incredibly expensive, mainly because the first time the thing you were building met the customer was right at the end of the process. Of course, by which time it was too late to make any changes. Happily, things now are very, very different. Design work is done just in time. It's iterative, collaborative. There's no big dump of design files to the development team. But more importantly, the customer is involved throughout the entire duration of the process. I'm sure people are familiar with this little cycle of learning, making, and testing. It's very agile, it's very lean. What you make is based on insights you've learned from customers. Now, hopefully, only products that people both want and that grow the business get built. Now, that shift from big design up front to just-in-time design matches one that many organizations are making right now. From a command and control model, in fact, one that Bud just mentioned in the previous session, a model that was designed 100 years ago and perfect for the industrial age, to one of being responsive. And involving customers in the process is just one part of what it means to be responsive. It goes much deeper than that. It's a shift from organizations being optimized for predictability, and here is my predictable little world. Maybe geography is not necessarily my strongest suit, but it's from organizations being optimized for predictability to ones that are built for an unpredictable world. Which isn't to say that we're all going to be taken out by an asteroid anytime soon, but that the future is very difficult to plan for. It's also a shift from companies that stand still versus ones that can move fast. Now, I've included Roadrunner here, but actually Roadrunner was, of course, the ultimate one-trick pony. All he could do was move very, very fast and escape Coyote. All he could do. But it's actually, with being responsive, is about having the capabilities to adapt and then doing that quickly. Faster than your competitors, which means faster to innovate and faster to win new customers. Right now, you're probably thinking, what does this actually mean in real life? And what does it mean for me, my team, and my company or organization? Now, I've just mentioned 3 levels of a company, but responsiveness has to be embedded at all levels of organization to succeed. In fact, an organization really has to disrupt its own values before it can disrupt markets. And to do that successfully, I'm going to talk about 5 behaviors that need to exist at every level of a company. And they're all hallmarks of a successful, responsive organization. And I should say at this point that, I don't know how many of you heard of an agency called Undercurrent. They were one of the very first companies that started talking about the 5 behaviors I'm going to talk about now. But more importantly, I'm going to talk about how you can take those 5 behaviors and make them work for yourself. Okay. So the first quality of responsive organization is moving from a world of control and command and rigid processes, that top-down decision-making, to inspiring and empowering people to achieve great purpose. Now, empowerment is truly great because it often means that the people with the best insight and decision-making skills, often the people who are closest to the customers on the ground, get to affect the organization and make real change. However, placing that power in people's hands, making decisions, is an art in itself. How fast you can make decisions is critically important, as all being equal, the fastest company to make decisions will always win. Now, most people spend too long making decisions. There are decisions that deserve days of debate and analysis, but the vast majority aren't worth more than 10 minutes. In fact, when a decision is made is often much more important than what decision is made. And the vital thing is to gauge just how important that decision is, make that decision, and then move on. So a clever guy called Cat Watkins of BuzzFeed neatly describes this as the sliding scale of how many fucks to give. Rating both how you feel and the importance of a decision on a scale of 1 to 10, or to holy fuck, allows you to go into conversations better prepared to make a fast decision. It becomes your internal barometer for what's important. Now, I've just mentioned feelings, but how you decide to make a decision is really important. It's got to be driven from the purpose of the organization or on evidence. So one of the defining characteristics of responsive organizations is they see the value in customer insights. And this allows you, each time you make a decision, to ask, is this based on an assumption, a hypothesis, or an actual validated insight? Now, in the old world, decisions were often all about the hippo. And that needs to be the very first thing that needs to go. Now, the hippo is the highest paid person's opinion in the room, usually your boss. And in a responsive organization, you never hear anyone say, surely you're all wrong. You've got to use evidence and data-based decision-making to be able to guide you on your path. And these need to be programmed into your projects from day one. And of course, how you use and how you collect data is going to change over the lifetime of a project. For example, we often start our projects with a lot of qualitative insights from interviewing potential customers. However, once we launch a product, there becomes more that can be measured with data and measured quantitatively. The second quality of responsive organizations is moving from a hierarchy based on order, clarity of authority, rank and power, to organizations built on network and collaboration. And it's obviously no surprise that technology and connectivity makes self-organization very easy. Now, there are two parts to this. The first one is breaking out of your silo. Old-style organizations usually have completely siloed operations and strategies, in particular digital. And we all know that digital is not just a silo, and it needs to touch every single part of the organization. It goes across everything. And the second part is collaboration. So, for example, teams need to be truly multidisciplinary and represent all facets of the organization. So Made by Many, for example, from the very first day of a project, each team always represents each side of the company. In this case, strategy, design, and technology. That collaboration allows us to move faster and build better products. Now, that's easier said than done. For many years, I found working with people who weren't like me very, very tough. This is how I used to see developers. I'm a designer, this is a developer, developer is evil. A breed of people who were best avoided. Now, of course, I no longer think that developers are this scary, but that's because over time, both sides have learned to trust each other and respect the skills that each side brings to the equation. Collaboration is really tough, though. It means you can't work in a vacuum, and everyone needs to go on the same journey. And of course, our teams also include collaborating with the client. Your clients can bring specialist knowledge of the organization and the sector. This knowledge and experience needs to be embedded deep in the heart of the team. The third trait is moving from big planning to one of constant experimentation. I like to think that the guy at the top of the plan looks so depressed because he's just finished his plan and yet it's already out of date. Making big plans for the future is almost always futile. And one of my former colleagues, a brilliant guy called Andy Whitlock, drew this illustration to help explain. This is how you see the road ahead. This is what it will actually be like, and this is what you can plan for today. Which I think neatly sums up planning for the future. Now, planning too carefully for the future may be a bad thing, but that isn't to say that having a vision for your organization is bad. In fact, having a vision is good for the organization. However, the best way forward is not detailed plans, but iteration, experimentation, and prototyping. Now, part of the art of being responsive is the ability to look ahead. If anybody thinks this is freaky, yes, he has just taken his eyeballs out of his head and is carrying them in front of them. But he's constantly probing the future for opportunities in the short term. And you need to be able to experiment and have the freedom to be able to flex. And when it comes to each of those iterations or experiments, doing enough to discover and learn, but no more. Made by Many, we often talk about design at the last responsible moment. How much effort do you need to invest to get to the next stage? How much effort do you need to learn, build, or make, but without jumping the gun? Now, I mentioned this cycle at the beginning, and it's inherent to being responsive. The faster you can remove around that cycle of learning, making, and testing, the faster your organization can adapt and change. It relies on small teams of motivated people, and it's not just a production technique, but something that can last throughout the entire duration of a project. Now, here's an example of the customer development process that we use. This wavy line in the middle marks proposition, moves between what we know about the user and what we know about the product. And each time that wavy line moves towards the top or the bottom is one of those cycles of making, learning, and testing. And we're teasing out the most effective product through continuous customer feedback. and constantly increasing the fidelity of the product the further we go down the funnel, never going further than we need to. The idea evolves and grows in fidelity as it moves through the process, and that's represented in the quality and the fidelity of the things we make, such as moving from a sketch to a prototype to a higher fidelity prototype. The fourth quality is a move from privacy to transparency. Now, in the past, information was currency and was held very, very tightly. It was leveraged as an advantage. Now, with so much information and so much data, you can't possibly begin to predict what's important and what needs to be shared. So if you start sharing that information and not guard it too closely, people can start to actually use it. And the benefit of trusting people to use that information wisely far outweighs the risk of being open. But of course, if you're sharing that much information, it's really easy to be completely drowned in messages and information overload. So for example, we have many, many shared channels on Slack, which I've heard mentioned quite a few times here. And how do you manage to keep on top of that and not be overwhelmed? An important rule is to view communication as being about progress. And it needs to be guided by your organization's vision and evidence from the customer. Communication needs to be purposeful. Now, the last and perhaps the most dominant trait of responsive organizations is moving from being profit-focused to purpose-focused. Now, previously, organizations used to be very focused on making money, usually with a very short-term lens. Now, profit is often seen as a byproduct of success, and that's achieved by bringing together many disparate people together. And to do that, everyone needs a shared purpose or goal. This, by the way, is the freakiest illustration out of the bunch. But your purpose is a combination of the results you want to achieve and the way that you want to do it. It's also a framework and a set of principles that helps bring both people together and guide them for the future. So to sum up those 5 qualities: make decisions fast, based on importance and evidence; collaborate from day one of a project, breaking out of your silo and include the client; use experimentation to prod the future, making use of the last responsible moment; transparency is power, and communication is about progress. And finally, responsive organizations have a deeper purpose than profit alone. Now, those 5 qualities are great, but how do you sell that approach to clients? Firstly, by saying that it's not a trap. Being responsive is not about getting things that agencies don't particularly like to do, but a genuine belief that in the future, only responsive organizations will be successful. Now, we often work for large organizations who need to be taught this approach, and we go in to help accelerate the process. However, everything I've just talked about is scary for the client. The problem is that the old way of working feels comfortable and predictable. Big strategy up front, lots of deliverables, a long decision-making process. It's a gigantic comfort blanket. But this is a false illusion. It's a reality that the future is unknown, unclear, and untested. And speculation and upfront strategy just invites people to be disappointed in the future. But even when people are aware of Agile and working in this way, it's very easy to fall back into old habits. So, for example, clients who say, "We love the way you collaborate, we want this from you," but who then issue a tender document that asks us to go away and work in a vacuum and in isolation and respond to the problem by ourselves. A better solution would be kicking off a tendering process with a request for a workshop, a 2-hour session where, with the client, we can work out what the problem is together, start collaborating, and see how the relationship is going to go. And we've found this is a far more effective way of starting a relationship, and one that our most forward-thinking clients often ask for. However, this is just the start of the process. Selling and organizational change needs to continue once the project has started. Now, it's tough when you remove the security, the illusion of security that old-style deliverables provide, documents and specifications that no one reads. Instead, clients need to sit with you side by side, and they need to be taken on a journey. Together, you need to focus on the new value of what you're delivering. Progress has a very different measure. One way that we do this is by sharing everything that we do. Not just the things we make, a Dropbox and a presentation of what we've done, but a private Tumblr that shows how we're making things and what we're learning. So, for example, photos of workshops, our sessions, test materials, customers we've met. Everything gets captured for the entire team to see. It's visual, accessible, and totally transparent. And then finally, I've mentioned collaboration between clients and teams. Projects work best when clients participate fully. So we train our clients in the tools and techniques that we use every single day, things so they can use them too. So things like sketching, insight gathering, synthesis, things that they may be unfamiliar with. These skills then get shared across the client's organization, and the effective responsiveness begins to grow. So I hope by now that I've shown that behaving in a responsive way is better business, but also creates better outcomes for everyone, for clients, customers, and colleagues. Now, to end in the way that I started, big design up front and not being responsive often resulted in building things that no one ever wanted. And the internet is full of digital landfill, things that people never ever use. Whereas just-in-time design, or being responsive, has meant that I now design things that people genuinely want, use, and have long-term value. Because after all, life is way too short to build things that nobody wants. Thanks.